Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt, live in California today. That means it's very early in the morning in California, but I don't mind doing this when I'm teaching, which I'm not doing. I'm in California to salute, with hundreds of others, the career of Pete Wilson, former governor, former senator, former mayor, former state legislator, former everything, chairman of the World War II Museum, Marine. And so you don't get to toast a great man of America very often, so I'm happy to be here this week. But it doesn't mean getting up early and going to bed early, but that's fine. You get used to anything in this world. I have nothing to complain about. There is a great deal of bad news, and so I will come to that in the moment, and a little bit of good news. One great bit of news is both Ohio State and the Browns won. Now, this is not a sports talk show. There are two kinds of show on the radio, political news talk and sports. And the former don't do sports and the latter don't do politics. That's fine. The two shall never meet. However, I do have to begin with Baker Mayfield, who dislocated his shoulder during the game that the Browns won 31-21 at home. And Baker Mayfield came out and gave a little press conference afterwards. I just love this clip, cut number one.
I'm not doing it for any gratification or anything. I do, I put in the work during the week, come out on Sundays because I truly love this game. I'm blessed to play it as a job. So it's just one of those things. You're going to have to grit things out. I'm not the only one that's dealing with injuries. And by no means is that the case. Everybody's fighting through something. The healthiest you are the whole year is when you show up for camp. After that, it's all downhill. So, I'm going to tough it out just because these guys are as well. I'm not getting hit every play. So when I do, let's just go. Let's roll with it.
I just think that is a terrific statement of leadership and of motivation. I love this game. That's why I play. I love doing what I do. That's why I do it. And why I work every day. Why he works. Now, I'd like to get 4 months off a year. That would not be, I don't think Phil Boyce is going to go for that. But I would love to get 4 months a year off. Let's get to the rundown. All right. Baker Mayfield, I salute you. You're the man. To Jimmy Haslam, pay the man. That should actually be addressed to Andrew Berry, who's the general manager, who's a wizard, who got Demetric Felton in the 6th round from UCLA, who scored on a 33-year mind-blowing touchdown. But I digress. Let's go to the rundown. It was a very bad week for Joe Biden last week, and the Sunday shows showed it. My friend Chuck Todd, cut 22.
Well, look, I think he's got a pretty big credibility crisis on his hands because all of these problems in some ways showed up after he said something basically the exact opposite. Afghanistan withdrawal wasn't going to be messy. This wasn't going to look like Saigon. The booster shots, he came out and essentially said 8 months and even indicated maybe we should start it as soon as 5 months. Now we're not sure if anybody under 65 is going to get a booster shot. So, he's had, and of course the border has been, whether this, we can talk about the border problems. You could say there's years in the making. But it's pretty clear we have a bigger problem now than we've had in years, and these policies have turned into becoming a magnet. So he's got a lot of work to do. The UN speech, look, he's got some credibility issues on the world stage, make sure that people still view America as not just a stable democracy, but a competent leader of the free world right now. So look, he's got a lot of work to do. I think the next month's going to probably still be tough for him politically because he's got to get this big bill through Congress. If he can get that thing passed, Willie, I think he can start to, take a few breaths here a little bit. But he's got a lot on the line here this month, that's for sure.
Chuck Todd summarizing the fact that Joe Biden is emerging as a figure of some ridicule and a great deal of political weakness. On Sunday, the Senate parliamentarian ruled that the immigration measure that would have provided amnesty for Dreamers and many other people cannot be included in the reconciliation package that requires only 50 votes to pass. So it ain't going to win. Big blow to Joe Biden. It wasn't just Chuck, though. Jonathan Karl, another journalist I esteem a great deal on ABC yesterday, cut 21.
Well, it looked like the White House was getting ahead of the science, that the White House was getting ahead of the health experts. And, Dr. Fauci seems to be in a little bit of a spin mode and saying, look, we were just wanted to be ready by this date. But make no mistake, Martha, when the White House rolled this out, the expectation was you would begin the process of boosters for everybody on September 20th. That was not the recommendation of the FDA advisory panel. It will not be what the FDA goes forward with in all likelihood. And this is important because Biden's credibility on COVID has been what has driven his level of his popularity. I mean, this is what he is trusted most on and what he needs to be trusted most on, and we've seen it eroded over the past several weeks.
And with it, Biden staying. By the way, the booster fiasco, it's a fiasco. The FDA's advisory panel, a bunch of outsiders looking in, and I fear, because this happened in the United Kingdom, that these scientists are allowing their concerns over equity around the world to influence the decision of what's best for Americans. I think the boosters should go forward. The president, I say thank you very much. But Americans are free people. If they want to get a booster, they can get a booster. And I'm going to get a booster, by the way, next week after I get back to D.C. But I'll tell you this right now. It's just ridiculous what's going on. Martha Raddatz on This Week, also summarizing a Biden disaster of Friday, the drone strike that killed innocents in Afghanistan. Cut 19.
That stunning admission from the Pentagon that a drone strike in Kabul amid the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan killed 10 civilians with no connection to ISIS-K. It comes with the Pentagon already reeling from the revelation that Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley privately conferred with his Chinese counterpart to avert conflict in the final months of the Trump administration.
That is just another... The drone strike is very, very bad. I do want to warn Republicans, though. I believe that their targeting General Milley is profoundly wrong. I've been doing a lot of checking on General Milley because I know from the previous administration he was quite well esteemed by Republicans in the West Wing. I know that President Trump says some bad things about him now, but he was very highly esteemed, courageous warrior, good administrator, righteous man, extraordinary, great man of faith, a great Catholic guy. And I've been digging around, and I think when we get to the bottom of the Chinese phone call, you're going to find Mark Esper behind that, not General Milley. Now, let me also talk, though, about Representative Michael Waltz from Florida adding to the sort of summary of the weekend, cut number 18.
Yeah, Martha, first my heart and my thoughts and prayers go to this aid worker and their family. Every time I think this story can't get worse, it does. And it's just heartbreaking. But, Martha, I want to take a step back and just unpack a few things, if we have a second, that General McKenzie said there. Number one, the military mission on the ground was put in an impossible situation. They were giving two conflicting missions. One, a full withdrawal in the face of enemy contact and obviously ISIS threats. But on the other hand, they had to stay in a posture to still be able to receive people and keep gates open and have our American citizens and others flow through. And those were conflicting. And they were put in that position by the White House.
Now, I want to pause for a moment. This is the most important story. It gets barely any coverage. Barely. There are Americans trapped in Afghanistan. There are hundreds of American citizens, something around 100, and thousands of American residents with green cards, and they're trapped there. In Afghanistan, the LGBT community, according to AMP, is being hunted down. And the Taliban says you can only do one of two things, stone them or push a wall over on them. Rick Grinnell spoke up for the LGBT community in Afghanistan. So am I. We are not paying any attention to this. And it's not just them. Bernard Condon and Julie Watson, finally for AP. First story. I've got it in my hand. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding it up. Fearful U.S. residents in Afghanistan hiding out from Taliban. It follows, and it's not hard to find the stories. I'll talk with Salena Zito about her column. For these Marines, a constant rush to 0 hour to rescue stranded Americans. There are people that know where these people are. They're working around the clock, and the State Department is not doing anything. Not doing anything. Now, I am very careful not to tell you what I hear that would imperil anyone. I am here to tell you that the American media is not throwing the light on trapped Americans and American residents and SIV applicants, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of whom are there in Afghanistan. I can't report what I don't know. I just know that they're there and they're trapped. The State Department has fallen down completely on the job. This is Joe Biden's job. Do not leave Americans behind. Do not leave American residents behind. And the president has done that. The president is already a failure. He will never erase this indelible stain, but he can mitigate the damage he's doing. And going up to going up to Delaware, Rehoboth Beach, and riding bikes on the beach, not a good look, Mr. President. Go to work. Get these people home. I'll be right back after the first break on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. If you're just joining, you didn't get to hear the best quote of the day, which I played at the beginning of the show. This is Baker Mayfield, Browns quarterback, after the game yesterday. I just love this quote so much. Cut number one.
I'm not doing it for any gratification or anything. I do, I put in the work during the week, come out on Sundays because I truly love this game. I'm blessed to play it as a job. So it's just one of those things. You're going to have to grit things out. I'm not the only one that's dealing with injuries. And by no means is that the case. Everybody's fighting through something. The healthiest you are the whole year is when you show up for camp. After that, it's all downhill. So, I'm going to tough it out just because these guys are as well. I'm not getting hit every play. So when I do, let's just go. Let's roll with it.
I'm not getting hit every play. You know why I like that? I often say, and the fetching Mr. Hewitt often says, it's sort of one of our mantras. We have one mantra, it's easier with two, and the second mantra is we have no problems. Now, of course, we have stuff comes up. I mean, people get sick. Eventually people die, and you're sad, and very bad things happen. Any life has a best day and a worst day, and every year has a best week and a worst week, and every month has a best day and a worst day, and every day has a best hour and a worst hour. So there's always a bell curve in every segment. But Baker Mayfield was saying other guys on this team get hit every day, like Jed Wills or Jack Conklin. They're just getting crushed by these giant defensive ends and linebackers who are trying to kill Baker. And what he's saying is, get some perspective. Yeah, I dislocated my shoulder and I played. Well, that's a pretty big deal, but mostly get some perspective. My perspective is no American has any problem, except the 100 Americans that are in Afghanistan. I mean, there are people who are dying and sick this morning, and they're listening to this, and I feel for you. There are people who are up in the middle of the night in California who are driving long ways to work and juggling childcare. I'm about to go through the story set. I understand problems, but you really have to always understand that if you're not sick or someone close to you isn't sick, you really don't have problems. If you're addicted, you're sick, by the way, and you need help, and so you might have problems. But when I read these stories, there's a point to this whole thing. Just keep in mind, Baker Mayfield dislocated my shoulder. I have to play. I love the game. Great. It's good to love what you get to do because then it's not work. But other guys got it harder than I do. Okay, I just love that attitude. Story number one from yesterday. Afghanistan's LBGT community say they're being hunted down after Taliban takeover. Brought to my attention by former Director of National Intelligence, Rick Grinnell, good friend of mine. The Taliban judges ruled this weekend. Look, there are only two things you can do with a gay person, which is either stone them to death or push a wall over on them. We did that. We brought them back. That's on us. Fearful U.S. residents in Afghanistan hiding from Taliban, Bernard Condon and Julie Watson. There's a story for you. Every night, moving from place to place, Taliban leaving you messages, we're coming from you. I put on Twitter yesterday a quote from a Taliban commander. I tell my men, don't worry, they can still be martyrs. Oh, okay, so they have this PR campaign going on, and a couple of articles got out about how the people in Nowheresville, Afghanistan, are happy that the bombing stopped. Just the horror stories are going to start to come, and they're always going to come, and that's going to be on Joe Biden because it didn't have to be that way. For these Marines, Salena Zito column coming up after the break. A constant rush to 0 hour to rescue stranded Americans. It's ongoing, it's ongoing, it's ongoing. They're over there. It appears that the Department of State is not doing anything. Against that backdrop, when I read on the airplane Saturday this Anne Marie Chocker story from the Wall Street Journal, I really got a feeling that, honestly, don't they know we don't have any problems? Adults are throwing tantrums in restaurants, planes, and at home. Blame the pandemic. Restaurant servers, airline workers, and customer service trackers report a wave of blowups rooted in pandemic-related stress. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I did fly west on Saturday. And we had a not very good set of stewards, which is fine because it's a pain in the neck to be a steward right now. Now we commented, we just thought that's just not the normal deal. What happened? Because we have a favorite airline and we have a favorite way to go and we have a favorite place to land, and it's usually a great crew. And the crew matters a lot when you're traveling and you've got a bunch of stuff. And yes, we went first class. Why? Because I can at this age and because the fetching Mrs. Hewitt with me. And so you expect a certain stuff to happen. None of it happened. And Salena usually is never there. But I did not care. Why? Because I have no problems. I'm not in Afghanistan. I'm not trying to get 6 children in. I read a story on the weekend about an Afghan refugee family where the dad finally had to leave his wife at the airport because her visa was awry. Took the 6 kids, got on an evacuation flight. He had worked as a computer programmer at Bagram, and he's in Rochester, New York, and his kids don't speak English, and he had 4 panic attacks thus far. He's been to the ER 4 times. That is a transition and a problem. He got his life, and his wife did get out. Good story in the end. Hundreds of thousands. So don't complain. Don't be jerks. Just say, okay, this is not what I expected, or the line is too long. There's another story in the Wall Street Journal about childcare. Do you realize that American childcare providers have only had 87% of their workers come back? Why is that? Because they can all make better money elsewhere. And so a lot of them have left. And so a lot of America's working parents can't take their kids to daycare, which spirals in. Did you see that? Look, I am very against what is happening in Texas. There are 14,000, 15,000 Haitians have walked across the Rio Grande and have set up Bidenville in Texas. We had Hoovervilles during Hoover's time. We got Bidenvilles on the border now. Those people have problems. The people who are supposed to stop them from coming or take them back to Haiti, they have problems. The people whose communities are burdened by the arrival of 14,000 Haitians who don't speak English have problems. Everybody has real problems. We have no problem, except that we have the FDA and the CDC. Now, this gets me going. The FDA has got the ability to approve Pfizer's booster. In Israel, they have approved this booster. Israel has been ahead of us on the science at every step of the way, except for the invention of the vaccine, which Pfizer did first, followed closely by Moderna and Johnson & Johnson. Israel rolled it out. Israel got immune first. Israel says we're doing boosters and everyone gets one. Why? Because it'll stop the 4th wave. It's completely intuitive. The risks are minimal. They're not non-existent. Occasional case. I mean, very rare cases of young men getting the inflamed heart condition. Very rare. Very, very rare. That happens anyway. And by the way, everyone should get the vaccine. I've told you that many times. It's a no-brainer. A no-brainer. A no-brainer. But unless you've got an underlying medical condition that says don't get immunity. But I don't believe in the government mandating vaccines because we are a free people and people get to make choices in this country. One of those choices ought to be to get a booster. And I'm going to get a booster as soon as I'm 6 months out, which is this week, from my vaccine. Why? Because I don't want to get this. I don't want to break out. And I don't. I have too many people on the spectrum from, it was a cold, now former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, to they're dead. Right? They're dead. And people in between who almost died and didn't, and people who stayed home for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and felt horrible and have long COVID. I don't want it. It's not worth it. I don't want to have to use ivermectin, although I believe there is some independent verification of its effectiveness. I don't want to do that. I just don't want to get it. I want to be here talking to you every morning, and I want people to be smart. So if you're driving to work, listen to me. This is not even a close call. You weigh the potential downsides against the potential risks. That's life. It's not a close call. Go get vaccinated. Go get a booster as soon as you can get a booster. And to the FDA, I say, I believe you have smuggled in so-called equity issues, which is not your job. Your job is this a medically acceptable risk for Americans to take? There is an overwhelming body of opinion in America that we ought to have the Right to Try Act, which Donald Trump got passed. We ought to have right to experimental medicines if we're up against the wall and time is running out and we want to do that, or the right not to take them. We are a free people. There are boosters that smart people like me cannot wait to get our hands on. Now, because I'm 65, I'm eligible. If I was 64, I would be as angry as ever because some FDA bureaucrat, someone's going to die because of FDA bureaucrats. And I believe, because they've been open about it in the UK, the scientific, oh, it's an equity issue. We ought not to use these doses. They ought to go to the third world. Guess what? We invented this. Our country has to remain productive. We paid for these vaccines. We get them. We ought to also up production and spend some of this crazy amount of money that Joe Biden is spending on opening up new plants around the world to give people the J&J. One shot requires less refrigeration everywhere. We ought to take care of the world. We ought to be the world's doctor. But if an American wants a booster, they should get a booster and no one should pay for it. Do you know that kids get thrown out of school and preschool? I learned this over the weekend. And they have to get a negative test to go back. And getting a negative test costs $150 and the deductible doesn't cover it and the government's not paying for it. How many families do you think can pay for $150? And yet we've got billions of dollars lying around unused because Team Biden can't spend a dollar the right way. I'm making an open offer to Ron Klain to come be the czar of this program, because this is not a hard program. You take the authority away from the FDA and the CDC. You say, Joe Biden wants the boosters going out everywhere, and we're paying for the way for negative shots. Meanwhile, there's another model that some school districts are using, which is, again, this is just common sense 101. A new COVID testing model aims to spare students from quarantine. I heard a story yesterday, because I talk to people. And by the way, it's not a story. I heard a true situation yesterday. We're a Little League team. I was talking about this with Generalissimo because he's an umpire. He's a throw him out of here. He's like the meanest umpire in the history of umpires. But he loves Little League umpire, and parents love to yell at him. He tosses the parents, too. So Generalissimo and I are talking Little League baseball, and the fetching Mrs. Hewitt said, did you know that in X city, a Y boy tested positive, so every member of his Little League team, with whom he has been only outside, is quarantined for 2 weeks. And that's just stupid. It's stupid. It's absolutely stupid. Now, there might be children, but the Little League, they're kids. They're not going to get sick even if they get it. And there's no evidence that this kid who got it and is positive because someone else in his family has been sick. Kids don't get sick. This is just stupid. The country is in the grip of stupidity, driven by equity concerns and a eight-headed hydra called the CDC and the FDA and the NIH, with advisory panels and too many people making too many decisions, and none of it is their business. They were not built to handle pandemics. They're terrible at it. They're just absolutely terrible at understanding risk reward and what a free people expect from their public health authority. And I like Anthony Fauci. I like Francis Collins. They're two good-spirited men who should not be making these kinds of decisions for America. America is a free people. We own the CDC. We paid for it. We built the FDA. We paid for it. We built the NIH. We pay for it. We make the decisions through the president, who wants, through his chief of staff executing, to have a vigorous rollout of the booster. Go do it, Joe Biden. Don't go back on vacation. Just do it. Australia and France are in a war of words over the submarine. Screw you, France. We need to get serious and common sense about China, and Australia needs nuclear submarines that work, not your bad French models. I'm coming right back. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Salena Zito is my guest. She is America's columnist. You can read everything that she writes at salenazito.com. We talked over the weekend about something that I'm not going to tell you about unless she can tell me about it. Salena, can you tell me about it?
I can't tell you about it yet.
All right, we'll leave it at there. Tell me about Justin Trudeau. You just wrote a column in the New York Post that is about Justin Trudeau, who by the end of the day, I hope is they're voting today, aren't they?
They are. They're voting today. And it's really interesting sort of what's happening there.
Canada, for the benefit of the Steelers fans. We're talking about Canada.
Well, my family we had a place up there for over 70 years, so I know a little bit about Canadian politics.
You're the only one in Pittsburgh, but go ahead. They lost yesterday. I'm happy. I got some heat on Twitter I got trolled by an Ohioan yesterday, and he said, East Ohio watches the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I wrote back, yes, they love to see them lose like yesterday. But you go ahead. Tell us about Canada.
So Trudeau called a snap election in August. And interestingly enough, he called it the day that the polls came out that Canadians gave him very high marks on his vaccine distribution, and they should have. They have the best vaccine distribution as a country in the world. However, they did not like that he decided to call this snap election. Why? Because, first of all, there's very strict lockdowns in Canada. And so they believed that it was irresponsible for him to do in the middle of a pandemic after being lectured forever about not doing anything. And all of a sudden now he wants everyone to go out and vote. And the reason he wants everyone to go out and vote is because he had high marks in the polling, but that didn't transfer, that didn't stay, because people looked at it as like, you're doing this because you want a majority government. Trudeau lost his majority government in 2019 in those elections. In 2015, when he first won, he brought in a majority government, the Liberal Party. But he lost it in 2019, if everyone remembers. That's when he was found in blackface several times. There was also a corruption scandal. And so he has had a majority government ever since then. He did this to get a majority government.
And for the benefit of everyone, including the Steelers fans, and especially the Steelers fans, when you have a parliamentary system and you're a minority government, you can't guarantee anything passes. You need help from the left or the right. So he's been in coalition with the Greens, basically, right?
Yes, he's been in coalition with the Greens. Now the race is tied. He went from a very sort of...
Well, he's a doofus. Doesn't everyone know he's a doofus?
He went from a very comfortable lead to be...
Well, that's a technical term. If I confuse you, think of H.R. Puffin stuff. He's a doofus.
Okay, He is a doofus. He is a doofus. This is seen as a vanity move by him. And even the people that like him are pissed off that he did it. And what's likely to happen today is that he still has either a minority government by tomorrow morning and or he's lost to the Conservative. The only way that Erin O'Toole, who is the Conservative that is running, loses is if the new People's Party...
Lefty. Yep.
If they siphon off enough, they are the far right, and they are the ones that are.
Oh, I thought they're the new lefty party. There's a far right party.
There's a new righty party.
Oh no, that's bad. Doggone it. Look, I like this O'Toole character. I think he reminds me of Brian and the other good ones who've been up there in the north. You can never remember their names because they're all Canadians except for Pierre Trudeau, who's a doofus. Stephen Harper was a good guy. Brian, whatever his name was with Reagan, was a good guy. They all great guys, right? You want to work with them.
Right.
All right. Now, the other big deal. I don't watch the Emmys. I don't know. Did Ted Lasso win?
I don't watch the Emmys, and I didn't watch the football game because I haven't watched football since 2016.
Have you watched Only Murders in the Building yet?
Yes.
It's terrific, isn't it?
Finally, something that makes us laugh, right?
Only Murders in the Building is as good as Ted Lasso was last year. And so Ted Lasso, I'm assuming Ted Lasso, I'll go look it up. I don't do entertainment news on a Monday morning because it just doesn't matter on a Monday morning. But Salena, I'm glad to hear you like Only Murders in the Building. In 10 seconds. It's just hysterical. And why is it hysterical?
Because it's funny and people make fun of themselves and they make fun of each other. And
That's
they laugh about it.
They laugh at themselves. Steve Martin and Martin Short and Selena Gomez are sufficiently secure professionals that they just mock themselves as they get older. It's a lovely show. Only Murders in the Building. Only Salena Zito on Monday morning. Follow her. Get everything she writes at salenazito.com. Coming right back, Hour 2 America. Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour. Hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt. on a Monday. I'm in California today, so it's very, very early in the morning. But, of course, Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News is inside the Beltway. And because I get Punchbowl News emails, I learned before you did last night that the Senate parliamentarian had made a very important ruling. Now it's in the Punchbowl News newsletter this morning, which I also get. But I got it last night. I got the alert, and it's a big deal, and that's because I get Punchbowl News. So maybe you want to go over to punchbowlnews.com and sign up. Good morning, Jake.
Good morning, Hugh. Thanks for that very kind introduction.
It's a true introduction. I did find out about it, and it is a very important ruling. Tell people about it.
Yeah, so the Senate Democrats were trying their best to include immigration reform and immigration overhaul as part of their budget reconciliation plan. Now, budget reconciliation is the fast-track budget procedure that allows the Senate to pass things with 50 votes. But it has to be very strictly tied to the budget. I'm not going to bore, you know this, Hugh, but I'm not going to bore your listeners with all of the details here on how it has to conform to those budget regulations. But the parliamentarian basically said no dice, not allowed, not permitted, and now it's going to have to overcome a 60-vote threshold. And we've seen, Hugh, for the last 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, that immigration reform is simply a very, very tall task when you need 60 votes.
By the way, I want to expand on this. One Republican senator, who's a friend of mine, told me that they were very worried about this ruling because this ruling would have allowed a great deal of legerdemain to happen. And they were going to say, okay, you can pay a fine to get right with the American government if you crossed into the country without permission. And if that had a positive budget impact, they were afraid that that precedent would be set. Now there is a precedent that will bind future Senate parliamentarians. It's a big deal. Heard about it first on Punchbowl News. Now, Jake, even before yesterday's ruling, the reconciliation project, the massive $3.5 trillion gut-busting, budget-busting, inflation-returning, those are my adjectives, fiasco from the Democrats was in trouble because Joe Manchin said, maybe we need a pause, and therefore they've not got 50 votes. Then Mitch McConnell has said, and I believe him, not one Republican will support raising the debt limit, not because it doesn't need to get raised. It does need to get raised. But because the Democrats are acting in a strictly partisan fashion on the spending, they can go do the debt limit on a strictly partisan fashion, meaning they have to put it on reconciliation and they have to move it along quickly. Is that a fair summary?
It's generally a fair summary. I would say a few things. There are a lot of moving pieces, and they're all loosely tied together. You have, let's take it from the top, infrastructure passed with a bipartisan majority in the Senate, is now in the House, and moderates want to pass it immediately. They got a deal, but they would pass it by September 27th. If it goes to the floor September 27th, it's likely going to fail because reconciliation is not done. Progressives will vote against it. That's number one. Then you have
stop, Jake. Would they get enough Republican votes to make up for the progressive defectors? Because I would vote for that bill because I know it wrecks the Democrats.
It's a very tough question. We have some disagreement internally at Punchbowl News about this. I don't think it would pass. I don't think it would pass. I think that I'm going to be completely cynical here for a minute. I think very few, even Republicans on the fence, will not want to give Joe Biden a victory right now. And it would be seen as giving Joe Biden a slight victory. It's a big bill, and it would, if it passes, by the way, I don't think it. I don't know the answer to that, Hugh.
Kevin McCarthy is a smart guy, and he's a friend. I haven't talked to him about this. So what I think he does is he goes around and finds as many votes as he needs to pass it from Republicans in safe districts, tells them, I will give you cover. I'm going to vote against it. Scalise is going to vote against it. The leadership's going to vote against it. But he goes find the 15 people who are against infrastructure, or the 20. Now, if it gets much above 20, it's pretty hard to find 20 safe Republicans like Tom Cole, who doesn't care if a few far-right Republicans are mad at them for an infrastructure bill. It screws the Democrats, right, if it gets out of the House?
It probably does screw the Democrats, but I think that there will be more than 20 no votes from progressives. I mean, we have an increasingly progressive and Democratic caucus, and there will be people who will say, no, we're not doing it because we don't know what reconciliation looks like. And
I know, and that's AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. I want people to understand it's the hard left.
It's not only those people. It will be more than that. It will be the old line liberals. It will be the old line progressives. it will be a lot of people who will look at the.
Oh, I love this.
Want
this just screws the Democrat. And Nancy Pelosi promised them a vote by September 27th, right?
Yeah, but that promise is kind of. I mean, so if moderates push.
Oh, she might have lied. She might have lied.
Well, she could change it unilaterally, but if moderates push for that vote and it fails on the floor, I mean, I don't know what that really gets them. So
honesty, accountability, proof that Nancy Pelosi is a woman of her word.
But play it this way, Hugh. Let's say Pelosi goes to the moderates and says, okay, you could have a vote on the 27th. It's going to fail. Or you could hold off until X, and I will get this done, and it won't fail. What do you do?
Everybody in the world knows what the promise is. Those moderates are going to turn out. What was the guy from Michigan who got head faked on the Obamacare into the stands and had to retire?
Bart Stupak?
Yeah, they'll all be Bart Stupak 2.0. Every one of those 9 who say, oh, yeah, they're like Wimpy. For a hamburger today, I will gladly pay you Tuesday. That's an old reference, a Popeye reference. But if they want to be stupid dopes who lose in 2022, fine. They can say, never mind.
Yeah, it's a difficult calculus for literally everybody involved, I would say. And then you have government funding you, and we are 10 days from a shutdown. Mitch McConnell is not supporting the debt limit increase. Pelosi looks like we don't know if she's going to tie debt limit to government funding at this point. She's been cagey on that. We'll find out today by, I would say, 10 or 11 a.m. before the House Rules Committee is supposed to meet ahead of their 12 o'clock meeting to set floor debate for this piece of legislation. So, just a lot of moving pieces here, and they're, again, all tied together. If you have a government shutdown or a debt limit crisis, which I would say is, I don't know, either one of those two probably a better than 50-50 proposition at this point, then what happens to reconciliation? Does it get held up? And furthermore, Hugh, government's going to be funded until December 3rd. So do Democrats see that as a backstop for their reconciliation and infrastructure package? I've been arguing at the beginning of the year that I believe it's a Thanksgiving or December or year-end story. That looks like it's creeping toward that possibility at this point.
And, Jake, here's the GOP view. Trust McConnell. McConnell obviously knows that the Democrats were between a rock and a hard place, and we're not going to help him. And I'm a Republican. We're not going to throw him a lifeline. This is not the quiz show. They're not getting any help. They jammed all this through, except for the infrastructure package, and McConnell supported that. And so it's all. If they want to fund the government, fine. They got 50 votes. They're going to roll us on $3.5 trillion, and they are rolling us. Then screw them. We're not going to help them.
Two things to think about, Hugh. Republicans would vote for a government funding bill if it does not include the debt limit, if it's a clean CR that includes money for disasters, includes money for Afghan resettlement. There's talk of including money for the Iron Dome in Israel. I'm not sure where that will all net out. But if it includes a debt ceiling increase, that is a no-go for almost every Republican in the House and Senate.
Right.
Number two, and this was from Mike Steele, who used to be John Boehner's spokesman, who I think you know and you've dealt with over the years. Not Michael Steele from the RNC, the other Michael Steele, as we say. He tweeted yesterday, if your plan A includes Mitch McConnell blinking, you better have a really good plan B.
And that's why Steele is worth talking to, because he knows. He knows. The leader isn't going to blink, because there is no upside, and they've screwed the Republicans. They have not ruled from the center. Joe Biden has not been a moderate. It's a hard left package. They blew Afghanistan. Americans are trapped. The Republicans are outraged. They're getting lied to. No one's returning their phone calls. And they've got 15,000 Haitians under a bridge in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, the humanitarian issue crisis under the bridge in Texas is going to be something Republicans are going to be focusing on a lot. I've spoken to a lot of Republicans over the weekend who are, and Democrats, frankly, too, who are, I would say, gobsmacked is probably the right word at what's going on in Texas.
The pictures. My God, the pictures. It's just those people are miserable and they need help. But how can Biden have botched this so completely and thoroughly on top of the booster, on top of the Afghanistan collapse, Jake? You got a minute. He had the worst week of his presidency, maybe of his political career last week.
Well, and also the situation with the French and the Australians and the Brits over the submarine, which is just passing no judgment on the substance of it, was clearly not handled well from the French point of view. They've recalled their ambassador, which is something, Hugh, I don't think I think we ever foresaw.
But Jake, let's pass that by. The Australians and the UK and the Americans are going to hold off China in the South China Sea. And so that's a good deal, and we don't really care about the French.
Okay, that's fine if you want to. That's fine. But I would say with his agenda on the brink as well, not a great week.
I love Punchbowl news. I really do love Punchbowl news. You got to go get it. The alert I got last night made my weekend after the Browns won and Ohio State won. Not great wins, but a W is a W. And then along comes a big L for the Dems. I had a good Sunday. Stay tuned, America. Thank you, Jake Sherman. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Josh Kraushaar joins me. Hotline Josh. Normally I'm rushed with Josh, but I wanted to talk to him a little bit longer today. Good morning, Josh. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh.
Josh, I want to talk to you a little bit longer today because, as I covered with Jake Sherman earlier in the show, it's push come to shove time in D.C. And the moderates got a promise from Nancy Pelosi, which she either has to keep or break. Mitch McConnell's not lying. He is not going to give them any votes for the debt ceiling because they rolled everyone else. There is no showdown because the Republicans didn't show up. The Avengers are not there. Thanos is there and Chuck Schumer, and he got his sub-bad guys, but there are no Avengers. The Republicans aren't there. So there's no showdown. It's all up to Chuck. What's going to happen?
Yeah, I think it's likely it will be very disappointing for Democrats looking to pass some form of this trillions of dollar social spending package. The dirty little secret in Washington is it's not just Joe Manchin. It's not just Kyrsten Sinema that are raising questions, serious questions, and holding their support for this significant amount of federal spending. It's a lot of senators in tough races for next year on the Democratic side. It's, a few dozen Democratic House members we don't talk about very often who recognize that, passing that kind of spending could mean their political demise. And very reminiscent, in fact, of the Clinton 93 budget bill that was, the prelude for Republicans taking back the House.
Josh, I call all those Democrats in the House, I call them all Bart Stupak. Every one of them is Bart Stupak walking around right now if Nancy Pelosi screws them.
Well, look, and they like having someone like Joe Manchin being the face of the opposition from a state like West Virginia. But the reality is Manchin represents the same interests, the same political tactics that a lot of these lawmakers on the Democratic side feel. They're not, 3.5, even if it's cut down, notably, it still relies on a lot of politically unpopular provisions in addition to the good stuff that's in the bill, namely higher taxes on businesses and wealthier individuals. So, and the other thing that's really important to understand is that there's been something of a realignment in the parties where the Democratic Party increasingly relies on upper income individuals, increasingly has support from elements of corporate America. So a lot of the sticks in the to pay for the $3.5 trillion or whatever the ultimate cost would be is going on to a portion of voters that the Democrats increasingly rely on in the suburbs and the more affluent parts of the country. So,
Josh, I have a theory. You're a smart guy. I want to test my theory out on you. Democrats generally have always believed that their base believes them. Doesn't say anything about whether they're stupid or smart. It just said then generally the Democratic base believes the Washington, D.C. Democrats. And therefore, the Democratic base has not stood up and said, hey, this doesn't make sense. Now, the Democratic base wants the restoration of the SALT deduction because there are a lot of them in California and New York and other high-tax states like Illinois, and they've got very expensive houses and a lot of property taxes and a lot of state income tax, so they want SALT back. So the Democratic leadership wants to give them SALT back. But if they give them SALT back and double the death tax and do away with stepped-up bases, they're not doing those people any favors. They're, in fact, screwing them royally. And this group of Democratic voters, who you just referenced, more educated, affluent, are going to know, and they're not going to believe the Democrats. I think they are really misjudging their politics here because of Bernie and AOC.
I totally agree with that. The Democratic Party has become something of a downscale, upscale coalition, and especially on economic issues, their interests are not aligned. And it is kind of humorous to see Democrats looking to find ways to get revenue from wealthier individuals while you have a cohort of Democrats, namely in the House, that are trying to get tax cuts for these same wealthy individuals.
Yes, it's incoherent. It's incoherent.
Yeah, so that's a political dilemma. It's not just Joe Manchin. In fact, I think Sinema is actually more representative of where the Democratic opposition is. she won a lot of those upper middle class suburban Phoenix, even some Republican voters in her election in 2018. That's her political base of support, how she got into the Senate in the first place. She's not in a red state. She's in a purple state, and yet she knows the interests and values of these voters, and it's not aligned with spending a lot more money and raising taxes on upper middle class and wealthier individuals.
No, Josh, can I stop for a second? I want to talk about Mitch McConnell, the Napoleon of the American legislative process in history. Now, that doesn't mean he's the only one. There have been other great generals. He met Wellington. There have been other great legislative generals in history. But it was Napoleon's gift to be able to survey terrain and in his mind see, I'm basing this on Andrew Roberts' magisterial biography of Napoleon, and be able to see not only where the advantage was, but how a battle would unfold over the course of a day or two. And it is Mitch McConnell's gift to be able to see where the legislative battle and where the issue will unfold, like he did with Scalia. The death of Scalia, he saw not just the immediate issue, but the one that came in 2016 presidential election and beyond, and he played the long game because he knew the terrain. Right now, when he staked out a month ago, we're not going to vote for the debt limit because you've got the votes to do it yourself, and you've been screwing us. It was just a brilliant maneuver. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I've covered Senator McConnell for a long time, and what distinguishes him in his understanding of the legislative process and the political process is, as you note, Hugh, he plays the long game. He's not just looking at the moment; he's playing 2 or 3 steps ahead, and I think he's done that. And that's sort of the hallmark of this strategy. Look, I think he knows that Democrats need 50 votes. They don't have 50 votes for a lot of these more more progressive measures, and I think it's very interesting that he's praised Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, said that they're almost like a de facto member of his caucus, and that's the key, building and maintaining the relationships with these 2 moderate Democrats to get a lot of his agenda or a lot of his what he wants done passed or blocked in this case. I think this is again a hallmark of the McConnell playbook. And look, I also think that Democrats probably are in worse position than they have been throughout the whole year in trying to pass their ambitious agenda.
Let me add another McConnell analogy for the benefit of the Steelers fans, Josh. You're not one of them, are you?
The Patriots all the way.
Oh, you're just as bad. Okay, well, you'll get it. There are great coaches. The Steelers had Cowher. They got Tomlin. That guy up in New England who ruined the Browns while he learned how to coach. His name must not be named. And right now, the Browns have a great coach, Kevin Stefanski. I mean, a great coach. I love this guy. He's going to be there for 30 years, a great coach. Yesterday after the game, which the Browns won, 31-21, and in which Baker Mayfield dislocated his left shoulder trying to tackle an interception because his rookie receiver ran the wrong route. Nevertheless, he came back into the game. With a dislocated left shoulder, popped back in. That hurts. And so Stefanski said after the game, my play calling changed. I wasn't going to call a play that would get Baker hurt again because he got a bad shoulder. And so McConnell isn't going to call a game plan that hurts his incumbents or the open seats. He's not going to do that. Democrats, because they're bad coaches, Pelosi and Schumer are bad coaches, are calling a game plan that is going to get their superstar prima donna AOC happy and make the grumpy old superstar player who's way past his prime, Bernie Sanders, happy, but is going to get all of their Baker Mayfield dislocated shoulders killed. What do you think of my game plan? They got bad coaches. We've got the guy in New England or Kevin Stefanski coaching the Republicans.
Well, look, on the Democratic side, I still don't get why Pelosi and Schumer have pandered as much as they have to the progressive wing of their party. I looked at the political environment last month, and you had major flooding in the Northeast and in the South. You had a bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed through the first round in the Senate. I mean, take the win. I mean, and if you're president, you look at every president in the last couple decades, going back to at least George W. Bush, certainly with Obama, they had the political capital to get their party in line. The Iran nuclear deal, not all that popular. Obama whipped his party, pretty much unanimously voted for it, even though it carried political consequences. why couldn't Biden do the same? If the infrastructure bill is so important and it's a big legacy item, why not get enough progressives in line to pass it without having to deal with the headaches that the progressives are going to give you on this big $3.5 trillion package? I mean, the sign of an effective president is getting their party to support their agenda, to have that political capital and that political clout. Trump, by the way, did the same thing. He pretty much got Republicans all in line with him and was able to pass that big tax cut bill in the first couple of years in his presidency. I don't know why Biden isn't picking that infrastructure bill, which has bipartisan support, and has buy-in from Republicans. Why not get that passed, get a legacy item in your books, and then worry about and then progressives call the progressive bluff. If they're not going to support it, if they're going to scuttle a big accomplishment, then that's going to be on them, and it's frankly the sign of a very weak presidency that he would let that happen.
You know what's screwing this up? There are two things screwing up the obvious thing. Nancy Pelosi wants a legacy because she's done. And so she's trying for a big Medicaid expense. She wants to talk about what old people get silly about there is no such thing as a legacy in America unless you're the president. Number two, Chuck Schumer is still afraid of a primary challenge from AOC. Aren't those the two small ball but incredibly important political dynamics that are driving the impasse and going to imperil 24 Democrats in the House and the Senate majority?
Well, as far as the second point goes, I think it's an irrational fear of the left. Eric Adams' campaign in New York City itself showed the kind of hubris of the left and how little clout they have when it comes to the voters, even within the Democratic Party. I think, if that's why Schumer's doing what he's doing, it's just not good political. It's not a good political strategy. He has a lot of swing state members up in 2022, and this could damage their reelection chances and his own ability to hold on to the Senate. Look, the legacy items, it's great to talk about, but you got 50 senators, 50-50 Senate, and you have a narrow 5-seat House majority. And it's one thing if you have bigger majorities and have the political capital to spend, but when you don't have that and you try to go full bore, it's going to create a significant political backlash. And that, she's got a lot of legacy defining accomplishments. She's been around Washington for decades. It just doesn't seem like good politics to, hurt your Senate counterparts and add more fuel to the Republican argument for taking back the House.
Well, I think, number one, Chuck Schumer would say to you, you're right, Josh. If I lose the Senate, I'm not the majority leader. But if I lose my seat, I'm not the majority leader either. And I think Pelosi would say to you, look at my refrigerator. I've got lots of ice cream. She has lost it. You know that. She's just not playing her old Nancy Pelosi game. Yeah,
I mean, look, leaders are elected to lead, do the right thing. And look, if Schumer certainly seems very worried about the Democratic base in the state of New York.
Yes.
That said, like I said, Adams in New York City alone took on the left and won pretty handily. And that's just the city, the most liberal part of the state. I mean, I think a lot of Democrats are running scared from their own base and almost overestimating the threats that the left.
Oh, Josh, AOC at the Met banquet. The Met Gala. She doesn't get rolled over except in the New York Post. She's the darling of the media. He's right to be worried. She could be a senator. She would beat him. 5 seconds. Do you believe that?
I actually think that I would call her, if she's making these bluffs to get Schumer to stay to the left, I would call it and try to defeat a faction that's causing the Democratic Party political headaches all across the board.
Next week, more on that, because AOC would beat Schumer Welcome back, America. Talking about control of the Senate with our friend Josh Kraushaar. Reminds me that Missouri, the Senate race there to replace retiring Roy Blunt, will decide whether or not the chamber becomes Republican. In that race is Representative Blaine Luetkemeyer. Good morning, Representative. Good to have you.
Good to be with you, Hugh. Always a pleasure.
Do you agree with me that as Missouri goes, so goes the United States Senate?
I think that's very possible this time. The numbers are very close, and we have a race that would normally be a lockup for the Republicans, but and I think it probably will be this time. But we have a very, very hotly contested primary where we could actually shoot ourselves in the foot if we put the wrong candidate out there and kind of do a Todd Aiken to ourselves again as we did about 12 years ago.
Now, I got to tell you, Congressman, I do not get involved in primaries except to disqualify people. Eric Reitens is disqualified. He will lose. He will not only lose, he will lose badly. I had him on this show. It was a rough 12 minutes, but the guy is simply broken politically. Do Missouri voters know that?
Well, yes and no. Most of them do. He has a very high floor but a very low ceiling, and our concern is that, and I heard that interview, by the way. That was a great interview. You did a great job of trying to get him to answer questions, expose himself, and he just refused to answer your questions. But I think, if we have a multi-candidate primary and with his level of basic support, he could squeak through. That would probably endanger the seat. If we can get it down to just one or two candidates to oppose him, I think then we can take him out and we can win and then win the general as well.
Representative Luetkemeyer, that is absolutely true. But we got one attorney general and two congressmen running, right?
Yeah, we've actually got probably three congressmen. We've got another outside guy by the name of McCulloch, who is a trial attorney out of St. Louis. He's the guy who's on the back porch.
Oh, the gun guy.
Yeah,
okay.
He's a pretty good candidate. He's got a great story to tell, and as you know, stories win elections.
Stories win election. He is a great candidate, but I know him as the gun guy. Otherwise, I don't know his politics. I know yours. You're a mainstream great conservative congressman from Missouri. Eric Schmidt is a mainstream great attorney general. Ann Wagner told me she wasn't running last week, so I don't know who the other congressperson is. Who else is in?
Well, I think you get Vicky Hartzler and Billy Long have announced.
Oh, that's right. Billy's in.
And Jason Smith is kind of sitting on the sidelines watching to see what happens here. But I think, to be honest about it, I think Donald Trump will pick the next candidate. I think if he gets in the race and endorses, rural Missouri is so much of a Trump country area that it will overwhelm whatever else is going on in the suburbs, and that person can walk right through the primary, I think. But
I don't think he's going to endorse. I'll tell you why. He hates to lose. This is hard. Greitens might win if Trump picks him and Greitens win. He's going to lose in the general, and so if he has to pick between the others of you, he would really need a political operation that knew Missouri well, and that's really hard. Missouri's a funny state. I have studied it forever. And I got Josh Hawley right, but am I right about this, Congressman? It's just a funny state. It's hard for outsiders to get it.
Well, it's a pretty independent group of folks. I mean, we're the Midwest, and we're folks that think independently, think for ourselves, and we do the same thing in politics. And it takes a good candidate to win, and you've got to have a broad base of support. And we'll see how the Senate race runs. I am not running, by the way. You kind of inferred that I was, but I am not running. We've got plenty of good people in the race. I want to run.
I thought you were on the sidelines looking.
No. I'm on the sidelines watching. It's true, but I'm not going to get in the race. I'm trying to help win back the House so we can be the financial services chairman or the small business chairman next.
Oh, you want to do? My old friend John Campbell served with you. And
yes, good guy.
He's one of my best friends, and he often he's lazy and he won't get up early to do the show from Arizona, so he's a lazy guy, but he's a great guy, and we need financial services to come back. So now that I know that, we can really be blunt. I thought you were being candidate careful there. Eric Greitens will lose that seat if he's the nominee. Congressman, do you agree with me?
I think that you're probably spot on there. Depends on who the Democrats elect, but there is a huge backlash against Greitens on the Republican side of the ticket. And I'll give you, for instance, my wife will. I'm absolutely positive not vote for him if he's on there. I doubt that she votes for the Democrat, but she certainly will not vote for him. So when you start taking people out of the political process, suddenly it allows the Democrats to sneak in. So that is our greatest fear. That he would win the primary and then perhaps,
he'd take. It'd be over. That is Todd Aiken. And Todd was a nice guy. Eric Greitens isn't a nice guy. So let me ask you this final question. Will the Speaker keep her commitment to the, quote, moderate Democrats and bring the infrastructure bill up for a vote this week?
Well, I saw John Yarmouth on one of the talk shows yesterday, and he was adamant about getting that vote next week on that infrastructure bill. Now, how they structure that, whether they're going to add more stuff to it, will they add, for instance, the debt limit bill to it? Will they add the CR to it? I don't know, Hewitt. I think they'll get a vote on it next week, but what all they add to it, that's hard to say.
Congressman Luetkemeyer, follow him at Rep. Blaine over on Twitter. Thank you. Keep coming back. I love the candor. Financial services. we'll be in good hands. We got to get the majority back so he and others become chair. Stay tuned.